Richard Prince has had a long and controversial career. Emerging in the 1970s as a new painter, Prince also works in photography and collage. But all of his works has the connection of consistent, unabashed appropriation and intellectual theft. His work has led critics to give him the title #Prince of Appropriation. Prince has a questionable habit of stealing others' artistic work and copying them, making minute, almost non-existent changes to them, but presenting them with a new conceptual backing that makes viewers consider the appropriate work in a new light. Though not all of Prince's work is blatant intellectual theft, much of the work has established his name, in the art world, deals in appropriating others' work and creating controversy. One of Prince's initial bodies of work that has established his fame was created in the mid 1970s when he was working for Time Life as an ad reader. He was both inspired and disgusted by photos found in magazine ads. He took photos of cigarette ads and copied out and cropped out the text, popularly referred to as the Marlboro Man. These pieces were titled Untitled Cowboy pieces that sought to undermine the seeming naturalness, and inevitability of the images, revealing them as hallucinatory fictions of society desires. The ensuing controversy that followed had appropriated after he had appropriated other people's artwork, generally in his favor. This first notable contribution of Prince had definitely stirred up the pot in the art world. Though the collection of photographs did not end in a lengthy court procedure, it did spark the conversation of Prince's work, ethics, rights, etc., that would build around Prince's work for years to come as he continued to work with the concept of appropriation. M&B Photo explained that the distinction between Prince's and Klassen's work and what they express, quoted, whereas Klassen's photograph is in service of the tobacco company, Prince's photographed to provoke. When an audience views a photograph, they generally believe that what they see is they trust in the medium to depict reality, or at least they used to. Yet Prince simply photographed an art-directed fiction, an image that meant to sell product.
Yeah, I think this quote expresses what the fundamental goal of Prince's work is, and that's to provoke. And this is something that Prince has continued to do throughout his career. So one of Prince's most infamous works, Spiritual America, is also one of his most decidedly unethical works. This is a highly disturbing image that presents the viewer with questions of authorship, ownership, and consent. It was originally taken by a commercial photographer. His name is actually Gary Gross. In 1976, he took a photo of a young Brooke Shields, and that photo could very easily be considered child pornography. Shields is age 10 when the photo was taken, and she's completely nude in the photo. The photographic techniques used by Gross and the way she's posed are disconcertingly sexual, or sexual in nature. It is doubtlessly a provocative and highly sexualized image of a young girl that an older man used for profit. In 1983, Shields was a big star in terms of movies, and she was a pretty well-known model. So when Prince published this photo in 1983, Shields and her mother had sued Gross in an attempt to suppress the image, but were unsuccessful. So in the press surrounding this court battle, the photograph was never reproduced by mainstream media, I would think, just because that would have been in poor taste. But Prince found it in an adult publication called Little Women, rephotographed it, presented presented it in a gallery on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Visitors to the show were only admitted by invitation, transforming the exhibition into an elite event. Yet, as this was the only image on display, viewers had to acknowledge that they had come specifically to see this controversial work, and that would make them complicit in the exploitation of a young Shields. So also exposing the public's fascination with scandal. However, he was also reproducing an image that he had no right or reason to exhibit in the first place, except to profit from it and exploit Shields' extremely public struggle while passing it off as art and making some half-baked commentary about the use of women as sex objects. That doesn't really benefit anybody else except Prince in the end, in my mind. Even the lofty title of Prince's rephotographed and of the exhibition, Spiritual America, was taken from a pre-existing source. It was an Alfred Stieglitz photo of a gilded horse, and it's often, that photo of Stieglitz's is often interpreted ironically as a critique of American prudishness or repression, which I think Prince was being very prudish and repressive. Unsurprisingly, the work remains highly controversial. In 2009, it was banned from an exhibition at the Tate Modern in London at the demand of the police. The photograph was replaced by a 2005 version, Spiritual America 4, in which Brooke Shields, then 40 years old, reproduced the original pose while dressed in a bikini. This work has been applauded for returning agency to Shields, who acknowledges the original photograph while choosing as an adult to display her body the way that she sees fit. In 2003, Prince's interest in exploring the cliches and stereotypes of our society inspired his Nurse series, which then explored the concept of the sexy nurse character in mainstream media. This idea led Prince to creating work that appropriated the covers of 1950s pulp fiction novels, which were a type of trashy popular novel format, commonly seen as an escapist subgenre of inexpensive fiction. Like the Cowboy series, Prince used source material that was commercial work made by otherwise unknown artists. While that art was originally used as a way to sell an idea, Prince used their work as a means of reconsidering what that idea represents in American culture. In this case, Prince isolated these nurses as an art object to closer examine the constructed icons of stereotypical fantasies. However, unlike the Cowboy series, I think Prince's Nurse series fell more within the bounds of fair use, as his influence on and alteration of the original work was more apparent. So like you can tell that he's actually gone in here and done something to the image by adding paint. What I found unethical to a higher degree than his use of other artists' work was the idea of a straight man profiting and perpetuating an antiquated perception of women as a sex object. This work is considered some of Prince's most expensive works sold at auction, like this one on the right here, Man Crazy Nurse #3, sold for $7.5 million. By bringing attention to imagery that many already considered trashy and in poor taste by contemporary standards, I begin to wonder if Prince's reproductions really need to exist in the first place. I also think it's important to note for the exhibition opening of Nurses, Prince hired actress Kate Moss to dress in a nurse's outfit, and then Prince himself took photos of her standing in front of the work as a means of advertisement. I guess my question would be, how is that any different from the way the original pulp novel art was used? And doesn't that just go against everything Prince is reportedly commenting on?
Yeah. And then in 2009, Prince experienced kind of the consequences of his risque artwork when he copied works from artist Patrick Carew for an exposition dubbed Canal Zone, and was sued for the copyright infringement. Very much like his nurse works, he took these photos and essentially just painted over them in sort of a garish way. However, in response to Prince's 2008 gallery opening, Carew responded with legal action. And in 2009, Carew sued Prince, the Gagosian Gallery, Lawrence Gagosian, and the Rizzoli International Publications Incorporated for copyright infringement. The defense argued that the material was in fair use, that Prince had transformed the piece and made it his own. However, the court originally ruled in favor of Carew, the argument being made that the work did not comment or critique on the original work. But on appeal, the verdict was revised, and a quote from the New Yorker explains, a two-judge majority made the surprising argument that Prince's work could be transformative even without commenting on Carew's work or on the culture, and even without Prince's stated intention to do so, making the case even more complex. And it essentially just like came out into a split verdict. But only a few years later, Prince came back with a new study of portraits that were directly stolen from a variety of Instagram accounts from noteworthy influencers. The show was dubbed New Portraiture and featured New Portraiture as a series of large inkjet prints on canvas. The only change that Prince made to the original content was including the Instagram format and retroactively adding his own comments at the end of the post, and then also essentially blowing them up to larger than life size proportions. And then, all else was the same. On one of the pieces from New Portraiture uses a Donald Graham photograph, Rastafarian smoking a joint. That's the name of the photograph. And the other, Eric McNatt's photograph of the musician and the artist Kim Gordon. Before enlarging the post, Prince deleted some of the comments and added one of his own, but left the photograph largely unaltered. Graham and McNatt sued, alleging copyright infringement. A U.S. District Court rejected Prince's motion to dismiss Graham's case to constitute fair use, as the reasonable observer must conclude that Prince imbued Graham's photograph with the new meaning, expression, or purpose. The judge said because Prince used essentially the entirety of Graham's photograph without substantial aesthetic alterations, the artist needed substantial evidentiary support to provide that his work was transformative. There were a wide range of reactions to the second large copyright infringement case, some in defense of Prince's work, quoting one of them says, and what Prince has done is he's blown up to absurd proportions, up to 40 times larger than the way that people look at social media and put them in the art gallery. And it's a way to confront the new portraiture. Also a quote from Courthouse News. However, there are still those who are against what Prince is doing and argued what Prince is doing is questionably legal. But even if something is legal and starts a dialogue, it doesn't mean that you should actually do it. Not all legal things are ethical. This is my opinion, is a reckless, embarrassing, and uninformed critique of social media and public domain. Also a quote from Courthouse News. And of course, we have Richard Prince's defense in defense of his own concept. In an article with The Guardian, Prince remarks, copyright has never interested me. For most of my life, I owned half a stereo. So there was no point in suing me. but that's changed now, and it's interesting. So sometimes it's better to not be successful and well known, and you can get away with much more. I knew that I was stealing 30 years ago, and it didn't matter because no one cared. No one was paying any attention.
Well, cool. Thank you, Lauren. And I guess we will turn it over to the class now. Thank you guys so much for listening to our talk. And I'd like to hear what you all have to say.